I was at work the other day and one of my co-workers talked about the car they bought at the weekend. The car they bought was a Kia Sportage, which if you don't know, here it is. It's basically just your bog standard SUV. Nothing really too special about it, you know, just a standard NPC car really. There's not really much else to say. As you can imagine, she wasn't too excited about buying a Kia Sportage, you know, it's not a very interesting car. However, one of my other co-workers pointed out that, you know, you should be excited because it's a sports car. Yeah, they said this car is a sports car. I mean, it's, you know, and the reasoning for this was because the name Sport was in the name. You really are, I mean, maybe they were being nice, but it kind of made me think of all the other times where people have been fooled by different car brands marketing their name to be slightly sportier or more appealing. And in all fairness, it does work because a lot of people who aren't necessarily interested in cars don't really know the difference between a lot of these things. For example, I remember when I was growing up, one of my friends' dads bought just a standard C-Class. I think it was just the 2-litre version. It wasn't anything too crazy. However, it had something like the AMG line package or something like that, where basically, I mean, it probably just had AMG floor mats and the odd badge here and there. But, you know, it wasn't an AMG. It wasn't a C63 AMG. It didn't have a, you know, 6.2-litre V8. It was just a standard Mercedes. And, you know, that's okay. But when car manufacturers say, you know, it's an AMG line, people who don't know about that car or don't know about cars in general are probably going to fall for it. And the funny thing is, he genuinely did think it was an AMG or an AMG of some kind, but obviously I'm not going to just say to him, you know, it's not an AMG, because that would make things a little bit awkward. But it kind of made me laugh whenever he brought it up, because he would say that, you know, I have a Mercedes AMG, when realistically it was just a regular C-Class with a few extra fancy floor mats, or, you know, nothing too special about it. And it is one of the things that does make me laugh, because not, you know, on some other cars it would just be special edition or sports mode, or, you know, another made up marketing nonsense. But obviously it does work because it gets people to buy the car. You know, it's something that influences them to buy it because it is the special edition, so it must be it's the sports edition, so it must be a sports car, when realistically it's just your bog standard NPC SUV. Like, it's nothing special. I do quickly want to specify though, I'm not talking about cars like the Type R or the M3 where they actually do offer more performance and they're completely different to the base model. I'm talking about purely marketing and naming conventions that have no effect on the actual car itself. Sometimes car manufacturers do tell the truth though, but people get a little bit confused on what that actually means. For example, a lot of eco cars will have a turbo badge on the back because they will have a turbo inside of the engine, but that turbo isn't there for, you know, any performance value. It's more there for getting better gas mileage and better MPG. It has nothing to do with performance. Like, don't get me wrong, it might have some impact on the performance of the car. And there are cars out there that will have a turbo version of the naturally aspirated car for performance. For example, the 911 Turbo, the Porsche 911 Turbo, the turbo is there for performance. They're not thinking about MPG when they're adding the turbo to a 911. And it's the same for the 944. Obviously, the 944 has a turbo version. You know, the Lotus Esprit has a turbo version. However, it's there for performance. I'm talking about purely eco cars that are meant to get better gas mileage, cars that, you know, aren't necessarily sports cars or performance cars. I don't know, it'll be something like a 1-litre Honda Civic VTEC Turbo, and someone will buy it thinking, you know, it's a performance car, it's a sports car, it must be fast because it says turbo, when realistically it's nothing special. But I don't know, it's one of the things that always kind of makes me laugh. And to be fair, it's quite a clever strategy from the car manufacturers because they know what they're doing. Now, here's something I'm sure you've all heard if you're a car enthusiast, and that's the argument that what is the point of having a fast car? And the reason they think this is because, you know, we're all going at the same speed anyway, and you're not going to be able to actually use the speed of the car. In a way, I have to say, if I'm being completely honest, I do kind of see where they're coming from. I have to admit it. I have to put my hands in the air and admit this. Of course, we don't need a fast car, and yet when we're driving in normal traffic, we are going the same speed as everyone else. However, these people might be spending loads of money on different pairs of shoes they don't need, and different designer brands which they, you know, don't need. I mean, one of my other hobbies is guitars, and I have probably 4 or 5 guitars. I don't need that many guitars, and I don't need to spend that much money on all them different guitars, but it's nice to have because I'm interested in it. But people who aren't necessarily into cars, they just see it as an A to B. They don't really see it as anything else but a mode of transport. And also, it is just a fact that fast cars are fun. Cars with higher horsepower are more fun. It's just a fact. It is just a fact. I mean, my MX-5 isn't particularly fast, and it's fun for other reasons, but I've driven, you know, fast BMWs. I've driven my friend's 350Z, and they are a blast to drive. And yes, whilst you're driving through a city or you're driving on the motorway, you're not going to use, you know, you're not going to always use the car's power. However, if you're on some quiet back roads and you're staying within the speed limit, you can put your foot down and enjoy the 0 to 60, or you can enjoy the acceleration. It's very fun, and I feel like a lot of people who aren't particularly into cars probably have not been in a fast car. They've not had the experience yet of what it's like to be in a car with quite high performance. I remember when I was younger, one of my friend's dads had an E92 M3, and it was the first time I'd went in a car like that, and I was completely and utterly blown away at what that thing could do. And it could be a reason for why I'm probably a car enthusiast now. It could be one of the many factors that has built up to this moment. And maybe it's one of the reasons why people don't understand it, because they've not been in a fast car. They've not experienced what a car with high horsepower feels like. But that's okay. And you know, when they do experience that, it will probably either terrify them, it will scare them to death, or they'll absolutely love it and want to do it again. I know when I'm driving with my girlfriend and I put my foot down in my MX-5, which is by no means a fast car, she gets a little bit scared. And you know, maybe it's because I'm a bad driver, you know, I could be a terrible driver, or maybe it's because she just doesn't like the sensation of speed. Whereas I've been in cars before that are fast, and I enjoy it. I mean, sometimes it does scare you a little bit, but it's a very exciting feeling. It's hard to explain, but it is something that non-car enthusiasts don't tend to understand. It's similar to when they ask me why I drive a two-seater car. But I found a lot of people ask, you know, what's the point in just having two seats? What's the point in having a car that small? They don't really understand the benefits of what it's like to drive. But I just can't really understand how they can't see that it's our hobby and we just view cars differently to them. And, you know, not everything has to be four doors, hybrids, and have a good gas mileage. Some things can be fun. One thing that makes me really laugh about people who aren't particularly into cars, or more or less people who have zero interest in cars at all, is when they do not do the regular maintenance for their car, but then they complain about how bad it is or how unreliable it is. One of my friends who I met a few years ago at an old job, he'd bought a E90 BMW 3 Series. I think it was just a 2-litre petrol. It wasn't an inline 6 or anything too crazy. It was quite a nice car. It was in good shape when he bought it. I think it only had something like 70,000 miles on the clock, so, you know, not that many at all for its age. Anyway, he owned this car for a couple of years, and I do not know, I genuinely do not know how it survived. I don't even know how it passed MOT, because it was shocking what happened to that car. After a couple of years of ownership, he must have done I don't think he did any service on this car, because it definitely wasn't leaking oil. Anyway, after a few months of him complaining about how the car was running bad or it sounded weird, we went outside to look at the car together. He lifted the hood, and basically after checking the dipstick, there was no oil. There was no oil in the car. I highly doubt that car was ever serviced whilst he owned it. And I remember asking him if he had serviced or checked even checked the oil of the car. And I think I remember him mentioning that's something that his dad used to do when he was living at home. So now that he's moved out, he's not used to regular car maintenance being part of his, responsibility. But even now when we talk about this situation, he always says, how bad the car was and that it's meant to be reliable because it has quote unquote German reliability. I mean, even if you bought a Toyota Hilux and you put no oil in that thing, it would not run. You need oil in your car for it to run. But obviously now he's going to have the reputation in his mind that BMW is a bad... And don't get me wrong, BMWs do burn oil. They do definitely burn oil. But at the same time, if you're regularly checking your car's oil and water and other important things like tyre PSI, then you're going to know what's going on with your car. And also it's things like servicing, and there's so much more to maintenance than just checking obviously oil and water, but it's a start. And I feel like a lot of people just, even if they pay someone else to do it, it's better to do than not do at all. And it's always just one of them things where people complain about how bad their car is, but it's actually because they're not maintaining it correctly. People do tend to forget that cars are actually machines. They have engines, there's moving parts that need regular maintenance. And if you don't look after them, things will go wrong, things will break. Don't get me wrong, there will be certain cars that aren't actually that great, and things will randomly break for no reason. However, things like checking the oil and getting your car regularly serviced each year is so important. Please subscribe if you did find some enjoyment in this video. It does really help out the channel. And also, thank you so much to everyone. I know all the comments on my last video, obviously I've not made a video in over 6 months, so there was a lot of really nice comments, and it is very much appreciated. I do really appreciate it. It means a lot to know that people actually do enjoy watching my content, so thank you so much for the lovely comments. And now that I finally have the time to make videos, I will be, trying to upload at least one a week. That's going to be my goal. So yeah, hopefully I see you soon in the next one.